Yoko Taro, the creator of both the NieR and Drakengard games, once stated, "I don't really remember what happened in Drakengard." At first glance this seems kind of absurd, but the Drakengard and NieR games take place over a long period of time. Like, a really long time. Between the inciting events of Drakengard to the latest chronology of NieR Automata, there is a span of several thousand years, with many events being added as retroactive canon. Despite the fantasy and sci-fi we see later as the series progressed, we actually begin in medieval Europe. At this time, Earth is still exactly as history remembers it in real life. Charlemagne's descendants rule over the Frankish kingdoms in the west, and the Byzantine Empire stands in the east. The diversion from our history begins suddenly in the year 856, when a series of devastating earthquakes ravage the world, all the way from Tunis to Kyoto. A mysterious city appears overnight in the Iberian Peninsula, and rumors of strange creatures appearing spread. In 858, a swarm of dragons decimate much of Europe, and the Byzantine Empire falls. In 862, King Louis II of West Francia, aka Louis the Stammerer, is murdered, an untimely death by almost 2 decades, throwing the other Frankish kingdoms into disarray, which then collapsed shortly thereafter. In light of these events, the entire concept of nations is basically disregarded entirely, and the people of Europe now collectively begin to refer to the region, or at least what still remains of it, as Midgard. By 865, talk of the mysterious city on the Iberian Peninsula has spread, and it becomes known as the Cathedral City. In 867, nobles from the former kingdoms escape to the Cathedral City to seek refuge and study the Calamity. This place of study is known as the Pythagoras Institute. In 868, the upper echelons decide that the Cathedral City cannot sustain the influx of refugees, despite their own arrival as refugees, and build what is known as the Chaldea Gate to regulate how many can enter the city. Following this, riots break out in the city and fighting ensues between the city soldiers and the refugees in what is known as the 10 Days of Tragedy. In the following 2 years, an increasing amount of people show signs of strange powers, and the Pythagoras Institute confirms that these people are magicians. By 872, magicians wield significant social, political, and destructive power and sit on top of the hierarchy of the Cathedral City. Realizing this fundamental social shift, in 875, the Pythagoras Institute implements a system to track and legitimize these magicians, and is thus able to dictate the social status of those within the city. In 878, the Chaldea Gate is opened after a decade of isolation. The Pythagoras Institute and magicians expand their influence even further, and begin to spread a new religion under the Pythagoras Institute Church. In 885, a magician loses control of their power and destroys a third of the city. The church announces that they have been researching seal magic, and it is thanks to this that the damage was mitigated. In reality, the seal experiments failed and were the cause of the incident in the first place. In 888, the church announces their goal to ensure the everlasting peace of Midgard through prayer and magic. In 892, the newly formed Church Investigation Committee begins to take over the neighboring areas, using large-scale magical weapons. By 904, they've expanded throughout most of the Iberian Peninsula, and the committee sets up the Lords of the Land system, in which nobles rule over the area for the committee. In 910, the church sets up the Magic Academy to further study magic power, and only a short 2 years later, there's another incident of magic going out of control. Luckily this time, the seal magic successfully mitigates the damage, and the only casualties are the rogue magician and the caster of the seal magic. Over the next few decades, corruption begins to set in. It becomes common practice for the church to accept bribes from the Lords of the Land, who are also constantly engaging in small-scale fighting with one another. In 960, the first Magic Academy president is elected. The elections are conducted solely by the Lords of the Land, who elect a non-magician as president. This causes a rift to form between the Lords and the Church. In 971, the White Rebellion takes place, in which a group of young magicians, fed up with the current president, rebel in the Cathedral City, but the rebellion is put down in a single night. In 985, perhaps the most influential event in pre-Drakengard mythos after the Calamity occurs. A famine breaks out. The amount of food coming from the Lords to the Cathedral City is greatly reduced, and its regular citizens begin to starve, while the church elite give money, goods, weapons, and even traffic women and children to the Lords in exchange for food. Naturally, this doesn't sit well with many people, and a group of magicians create an underground organization called the Blue Corps. Over the next couple years, the Blue Corps expands, and even some Lords of the Land show support. The church seems to be weakening as they trade away their weapons, and their potential magicians are sold away or die of hunger. In 991, the Blue Rebellion begins in the Cathedral City, as the Blue Corps seek to overthrow the church and government. However, the Central Magic Academy resorts to seal magic to stop them. Seal magic is linked to the life of the caster, so they use the lives of residents of 2 of the city's poorer wards to fuel the spell, decimating the Blue Corps in a citywide attack. Although some survive, they are intentionally buried alive when the rebuilding effort begins. After the Blue Rebellion, the number of entrants to the Magic Academy declines sharply. The church is then forced to rely on the military power of the Lords of the Land. In 994, in search of new sources of power, the Magic Academy lifts a ban on forbidden magic. Then a year later, the inevitable outcome is reached. While a female magician is performing a forbidden spell, quite literally as the verses of the spell are sung, she causes a large explosion in the shape of a flower that destroys the entire city and leaves nothing but ruins and ash behind. The malevolent flower that is released into the world appears before a dying girl. The girl has no name and was sold into prostitution by her family during the famine. After years at a brothel, she was imprisoned for stealing food. The girls at the brothel called her Usubeni, meaning light crimson, referring to her hair. When she arrived, she was imprisoned with 5 other girls, but they had all died out by the time the flower appeared in front of her. The flower takes root in her and brings her back from death, giving her the magical power of song, including the ability to summon malevolent otherworldly beings known as Watchers. Afterward, Usubeni changes her name to Zero. In the months following, people slowly return to rebuild the Cathedral City. In February 998, after realizing the only purpose of the flower is to destroy, Zero stabs herself in the heart to cut out the flower by its roots, but this fails and creates the 5 Intoner sisters. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In the images of the girls who died in prison with Zero. In March 998, Zero searches for a dragon with the power to destroy the flower. On the 11th, she meets the dragon Michael for the first time, and after he tests her, he agrees to offer assistance. In May of the same year, Juan meets a dragon named Gabriella. During this time, stories of the Intoners spread throughout Midgard. Suddenly in June, contact with all the Lords of the Land is lost, but how or why is unknown for the time being. In August, Zero meets Accord for the first time. Accord is a time-traveling android who is sent to record and observe the events that transpire. Accord tells Zero that she's become a singularity. That same month, One creates a male clone of herself, who's also named One, but all called Brother One from here on. Sister One and Brother One begin training rigorously, so that her brother might avenge her should she be killed by Zero. In December, the people learn that the Intoner sisters defeated the Lords of the Land. Due to the corruption and exploitation by the Lords, this is largely accepted as a heroic act, and the Intoners are treated as divine saviors. Later that month, Gabriella is transformed into a demon named Gabriel. Early the following year, One returns to the Cathedral City to much applause and celebration. Despite the flower's destructive nature and Zero's insistence that the Intoners must be wiped out, the sisters' rule is one of the more positive and thoughtful that Midgard has had in quite some time. As each of her sisters arrive, One sends them to rule a nation they're most suited for. 2 arrives first and is sent to rule over the land of Sands, in the hopes that her cheerful nature will brighten the lives of the people there. 4 arrives next and is sent to the sparsely populated and isolated land of mountains, to suit her tendency for paranoia and distrust of outsiders. 3 is sent to the land of forests due to her interest in the strange fairies and elves that have appeared there. 3 gives the Fae much more independence than the Lords of the Land who formerly subjugated and oppressed them. 5 is given the land of seas, since she is suited to deal with the lawlessness and anarchy that has befallen the area. For her part, One rules over the capital, although she spends most of her time contemplating the purpose of the Intoners and their origins. In March 999, Zero invades the city in search of her sisters, but her and Michael are thoroughly repelled by them. Zero loses an arm and Michael is killed by Gabriel. However, Zero manages to escape and Michael is reborn as Mikhail. In March of 1000, Zero sets out to kill the Intoners after recovering. This time, she heads to their respective territories and deals with them one by one. That month, she kills both 5 and 4. In April, Mikhail eats 3 during battle and Zero kills 2. Afterward, Zero arrives at the Cathedral City and battles Gabriel and 1. Zero manages to kill them, but Mikhail dies in the process. While grieving for Mikhail, Zero doesn't notice Brother 1 approach from behind, and she dies after being stabbed in the back by him. In 1001, monsters have begun ravaging the land with the Intoners gone. Brother 1 founds the Cult of the Watchers, with himself as the head. The cult is founded in honor of Sister 1, with an additional goal of eradicating the rampaging monsters. In 1004, the Cult of the Watchers begins to resume the Pythagoras Institute's study of seal magic. While effective at holding the scourges of monsters at bay, the cult is far less suited to hold power than the Intoners, and civil war begins to break out across Midgard. In 1006, part of the Land of Sand declares independence, and the Land of Mountains follows suit in 1007. In 1011, the first real test of the cult comes when a gigantic monster appears in the Land of Forests. The cult suppresses the monster and gains widespread recognition and respect. In 1012, the seal system is put in place. This system uses a young woman as the focal point to seal away the seeds of destruction, mysterious objects allegedly created by the gods that are said to precede the end of the world. This woman is called the Goddess of the Seal. However, none of this information is made public. The cult gains a large army of volunteers in 1014 as people from across the land seek them out. The second Goddess of the Seal is appointed in 1017. In 1021, factionalism emerges in the cult, and Brother 1 is exiled. In the same year, the first case of the red eye disease occurs. Those affected commit suicide by jumping to their deaths. The third goddess is appointed in 1022. Her inauguration is held publicly in the Cathedral City, during which a group opposed to the cult and the seal system attack. The attack fails and they are executed, but it is still enough to convince the priesthood to hold the ceremony secretly in the future. After years of aimless wandering, Brother 1 meets a girl named Brosa in 1024. They have twins the following year, named Gruen and Granat. Also in 1025, the nation of Caerleon is founded in one of the former territories as part of a collection of states called the Union. The following years see a number of goddesses of the seal die in a short period of time. In 1027, 3 new goddesses of the seal are appointed in succession. The 4th goddess is shortly assassinated. The 5th can't bear the pain of being the goddess and attempts suicide. The attempt fails, but she is judged by the cult and executed in secret. The 6th then survives the year, but is kidnapped in 1028. After the 6th can't be found, the 7th is appointed. The 7th is then assassinated in 1029. Another famine breaks out in 1030, along with further cases of red eye disease. Among this epidemic, the Cathedral City falls to ruin. The first king of Caerleon dies in 1035, and the second takes the throne. The second king is assassinated in 1039, and after the third takes the throne, the king's councilmen seize power, suspecting foul play on his part. The king is left as a figurehead and confined. In 1041, one's child Gruen becomes head of the Cult of Watchers. In 1045, the third king of Caerleon dies of illness and confinement. The fourth king takes the throne, and with the help of a traitor among the councilmen, poisons them and retakes power for himself. Few concrete dates are given for the events immediately preceding Drakengard 1, but during this time, Mana and Seirei are born to one's great-granddaughter Ramia. In 1080, Furiae is born in Caerleon. She becomes the 13th goddess of the seal in 1099. That same year, her brother, the Prince of Caerleon, Time, forms a pact with a dragon named Angelus, and one's descendant Mana becomes head of the cult, while also under the influence of the Watchers themselves. During this time, the Union and the cult's Empire are at war, which the Empire is winning. In this year, both the Empire and Union lose most of their troops. Furiae commits suicide after being captured by Mana, and Mana is killed by Seirei. After the deaths of the head priest and the goddess of the seal, nothing can stop the Watchers from descending upon the city. Time and Angelus set out into the city to battle a monster that has appeared, called the Queen Beast, and their fight brings them into a portal. The portal brings them to 2003 Tokyo, and here the timeline of Drakengard ends, and the NieR timeline begins, which I will cover in part 2. If you're watching this soon after it came out, please do bear with me and look forward to the release of part 2, detailing the events of NieR, which has far more detailed and fleshed out sources and dates, as well as covering thousands of years more. So the script is basically reaching the length of some novels. If you're watching this in the future, just click the part 2 that should be popping up about now, and I'll see you in the next video.